Yo, so it turns out we were actually like this close to getting one of the most unique Assassin's Creeds we've ever gotten, but it was canceled. So news just came out that an Assassin's Creed based in the Civil War was canceled last year. And this comes to light as the company is changing forever, with the franchise lead of Assassin's Creed stepping down after overworking on the titles for over 20 years. That is just such a long time. There's no way we don't feel the ripple effects of this. So in this video, I'll break down why people are so disappointed we didn't get this new Assassin's Creed title and why it was canceled in the first place. And what does this all mean for Assassin's Creed going forward? Okay, so a recent report from GameFile Steven Totilo revealed that Ubisoft canceled a new Assassin's Creed game last summer. This game would have been set both during and after the American Civil War, and followed a former slave who was recruited by the assassins to battle injustices in the South. This would have seen the protagonist going head to head with the KKK among evil forces that were prevalent at that time. It really sounded like a cool concept for the game and one that would have needed to be handled with great care and intelligence. But if done right, it could have been one of the best Assassin's Creeds in recent memory. And isn't that the truth? I have always wanted more games set in this time period, and I feel like it's just such an untapped area in gaming right now. Like, we really don't get a ton of games based in like the 1800s and all of that. We've gotten a few like Japanese games, but as far as American games, we just don't get a ton. It's either we go really far back or like modern or in the future. And I feel like the 1800s is just such an untapped area. And like Red Dead Redemption, it's such a successful series, yet so many developers avoid that time period altogether. And even though Assassin's Creed covers a lot of time with their games, this game would have fit perfectly into a trilogy. So Assassin's Creed 3 and Assassin's Creed Rogue would have been before and after this game. So 3 was during the Revolutionary War, where you fought with the Americans and you got to witness a lot of things like the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party. However, this would have been the second game in the trilogy, chronologically speaking. Assassin's Creed Rogue takes place both before and during the French and Indian War, roughly a decade before the events of Assassin's Creed 3. I just really feel like they could have made a very immersive world with this game. And I'm not the only one who was upset we never got this title. Because as many people that hated Shadows, loved Shadows, say what you want about it, but we have gotten so many games set in feudal Japan and Japan as a whole. And this just would have been a better, like, we either get like a dark fantasy, kind of medieval or like Viking themed game, or it's set in Japan. And we just don't get a lot of games in between nowadays. And other people were also upset about this. The cancellation of the AC Civil War game was tragic, mainly because it felt like the natural step in the franchise. What I mean by this is that it has been 8 years since Origins at this point. By the time this Civil War AC game would have come out, it would have been over a decade since Origins. Before Origins, all of the Assassin's Creed games have been progressively getting more modern with their settings, which is why Origins felt like such a breath of fresh air for the franchise, since it was bringing the franchise into ancient territory. However, since Origins, we have gotten Odyssey, Valhalla, Mirage, which are set in similar settings with a huge emphasis on mythology. Shadows was a step in the right direction. And they said Ubisoft is basically at a dead end here. If they play it safe, it will lead to franchise fatigue, which, given the state of Ubisoft right now, they certainly can't afford that at this point. So although Assassin's Creed has covered a lot of different periods throughout history, this just feels like it would have been a breath of fresh air, because although other companies have made a lot of games set during the 1900s, we haven't gotten a lot recently, not in the 2020s, you know? It really is either, it feels like games set in like Japan or Asia, like China or Japan to be specific, or it's that mythology kind of dark fantasy setting with the Vikings and medieval, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's disappointing, to be honest. But with that said, why was this even canceled in the first place? Well, obviously, Well, for starters, there's obviously going to be a huge link between Yasuke and this title. With the backlash they faced from Assassin's Creed Shadows and Yasuke's character as a whole, having a character that was a slave, I guess, was seen as a risk to them. But I think they're comparing apples and oranges here. I really don't see the correlation. GameFire reported on the previous Unknown Project's cancellation and stated that Ubisoft ultimately decided to walk away from its plans in July 2024 amid increasing political tensions in the US, and after a strong backlash to the reveal of Assassin's Creed Shadows protagonist Yasuke, historical Black Samurai. And I can see their point with this, and again, I see where they're coming from if they want to really avoid risk, but I don't think this is the same at all. the same situation. While still in the concept phase, early work had been greenlit by Ubisoft bosses in Paris and was underway at Assassin's Creed development studio. So fans were mainly upset at Yasuke's status or title, I guess you could say. Because Yasuke was a historical figure. While he was an historical figure and part of Japan, it wasn't really known if he was truly a samurai or not. But Assassin's Creed, although covers a lot of history, is not supposed to be historically accurate, like 100% accurate. They're going to bend the story a little bit to make it into a game, obviously. And there were also others who thought Ubisoft was pushing an agenda. But honestly, I think a lot of the frustration with Shadows came from fatigue with Ubisoft as a whole. You know, a lot of people were upset with the formula Ubisoft was using. It was kind of getting stale of the same empty side quests being done over and over again, and a lot of Ubisoft games started to feel the same. And obviously they had the quadruple A game with Skull and Bones, and I think there was just a lot of fatigue with the game as a whole. And on top of that, we were getting Ghost of Yotei at the same time. You know, that launched recently, just like a week or two ago. Incredible game. But I think a lot of people were looking forward to that. And as much as people wanted Shadows, it was delayed so much that I think people were just fatigued with the franchise and the game as a whole, even though it hadn't even launched yet. I think a lot of the backlash came from previous frustrations. I think a lot of the high expectations and frustrations came from fans wanting something new, something different than the previous formulas. But what does Ubisoft do with this? They cancel a game altogether that really isn't related to Japan or an historical figures like title. Like, was he a samurai or not? Like, this has nothing to do with that. Still in the concept phase, early work had been greenlit by Ubisoft bosses in Paris and was underway at Assassin's Creed Shadows development studios, Ubisoft Quebec. Set during the US Reconstruction period, the game's story naturally would have dealt with issues such as the rights of former slaves, racial violence, and fallout from the assassinations of US President Abraham Lincoln. Word of the decision filtered through the company last summer, just days after the attempted assassination of Trump in Pennsylvania, though it was not directly connected to this event, the report states. Sources told GameFile that the idea behind the game had been to show how racial tensions can be used to control society. Instead, in the source's words, Ubisoft ultimately decided the project was too political and a country too unstable. Now, I can kind of see where they're coming from to a certain extent with this. You know, if they want to eliminate the risk of a game flopping again because of the way Shadows went, I can kind of get that, although a lot of the Shadows issues weren't even just about Yasuke himself, but just the overall design of their games, like I mentioned earlier, and a lot of other ideas and design choices with the pre-order bonuses and things like that, that they ultimately went back and changed after delaying the game. There was a lot of situations where they just couldn't get out of their own way, and that had little to do with people's perception of the game and more about the mishandling of certain assets within the game. And they mentioned the assassination, and I don't like to get too political, but this game was not far into the development cycle. We would have not gotten this until at least 2027, 2028 at the earliest, because they have other games and things already planned for the next year or two. I think this would have been well received. This would have been a unique game in a unique time period we don't get a lot of today, like I mentioned earlier, where feudal Japan has been done over and over again with Shadows literally being in the shadow of Ghost Yotei. This would have been a breath of fresh air, but unfortunately, we'll never know how it would have been perceived. But what's next for Ubisoft as a whole? Because like I mentioned, there's some turnover in the company with the lead of Assassin's Creed leaving after over 20 years. Well, as of this month, Assassin's Creed alongside Far Cry and Rainbow Six are now run by Vantage Studios, the newly named separate business entity formed by Ubisoft with the 25% stake from the Chinese giant Tencent. The first Ubisoft creative house, Vantage Studios, will comprise workers within the company's Quebec studio, alongside Montreal, a bunch of other studios. And Assassin's Creed has had a very busy year, whether you hate it or love it. Fans got Shadows. They got a DLC for Shadows recently, and there's also more DLC coming for Assassin's Creed Mirage. That game is a few years old now, but it is still getting brand new DLC. And there's also the Black Flag remake, which is pretty much all but confirmed at this point. I mean, voice actors have accidentally confirmed its existence. There's been tons of leaks. We will probably see that reveal within the next month or two, I imagine. So although we got some DLCs and a remake, as far as brand new Assassin's Creed titles, who knows where the company is taking things? It's hard to say, and only time will tell. But if you want updates and the latest news on gaming, check out the channel. I'll keep you updated. I make videos on gaming news, ranks, reviews, and discussion. So if that's your thing, check out the channel and leave a like. Thank you for watching if you made it this far, and I will see you guys in the next. Peace.